Delhi, in a settlement far away, Afzal, a famous farmer, was living his simple yet passionate life. He would wake up with the morning azan, offer his prayers, and then head to the fields. The fragrance of the soil would fill his being with a new energy. The first rays of the sun, the golden view of the fields, the chirping of birds, the gentle breeze, and the scent of the earth would refresh his soul. Going to the fields early in the morning and working hard was a part of his life, and he found peace in this. His hands were accustomed to hard work, but his heart was filled with truth and compassion. People would often cite his honesty as an example. He would go hungry himself but help others. If anyone in the settlement faced tough times, Afzal would be the first to reach out. Working all day in labor and in the evening, despite fatigue, spending time laughing and enjoying with his children, this was his world. In the settlement, Afzal was living happily with his two children and a wife. A few months later, the blessings of Ramadan arrived at his doorstep. But this year, with the arrival of Ramadan, a great test also came. The wheat crop in the fields had turned golden, but there was no one to help harvest it. He had no money to hire laborers, and the burden of work fell solely on his shoulders. The intense heat, the struggle of fasting, and the day-long labor had exhausted his body, but giving up was not in his nature. Every day after Sari, he would reach the fields, drenched in sweat, harvesting wheat, and return home in the evening with tired steps. This test was tough for him, but his faith kept giving him continuous courage that hard work never goes in vain. Afzal had spent his entire life in honesty and hard work, but poverty had always been his companion. Every day he would bow in prayer before Allah, fast, pray, and never miss his prayers. Yet the difficulties of life kept clinging to his feet. One day after offering Zohr prayers when he reached the fields, a restlessness arose in his heart. Despite worship, hard work, and patience, why was he still struggling in poverty? Was there no reward for his good deeds and prostrations that could help him in his tough times? Was this thought from Satan or just his complaint? He couldn't decide himself, but this question seemed to have settled in his heart. It kept surfacing, making him restless every moment. He wanted to remove it from his mind but couldn't. This question is not just Afzal's, but arises in the mind of every human. I work hard with all my heart. I worship, yet why don't I find peace and relief? If this question has ever come to your mind, then listening to its answer will bring peace and satisfaction to your heart. Fasting in the intense heat and working was not easy for Afzal. Hunger and thirst had intensified. His body was exhausted, and it was becoming difficult to bear further. So he sat under the shade of a tree for a while and offered Asr prayers so that his body could find some relief. After the prayer, when Afzal raised his hands for dua, the complaints in his heart came to his lips. His eyes welled up, and his heart uncontrollably said, "O Allah, if my deeds are acceptable to you, then give me their reward in this world. The hereafter is too far away. I will earn more good deeds by worshiping again, but the deeds I have, in return for them, remove my difficulties and grant me relief. Is this even a life? I work so hard for every penny, and on top of that, the rain and storms ruin the crops. At least in return for so much worship, my crops should be better than others." After making this dua, he himself was shocked, but to calm his restless heart, he finally let the question slip from his tongue. He sat there lost in thought for a while, then composed himself and went back to the fields. The day's hardships had exhausted him greatly, but as soon as he reached home and had iftar with his wife and children, he felt peace in his heart. So he offered Isha and Taraweeh prayers. After the prayers, he returned home and, exhausted, soon fell into the embrace of sleep. But this sleep was not ordinary. It was a dream that would change his life forever. Videos, then thank you very much, but we would like to make a small request to you. Your encouragement gives us the strength to make better videos. If you like our videos, please subscribe to the channel and do press the bell icon. Share this video with your disappointed friends. Perhaps your one share could change someone's life. We would like to take your advice on whether we should start a new Islamic channel where we present lessons, faith-building, and interesting Islamic stories for you. Please write your valuable opinion in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us. Dear friends, the night had deepened and the landlord had also fallen into a deep sleep when suddenly he found himself in a strange dream. He saw himself in the field of Mashar, where the sun was at a close distance. In the scorching heat, everyone was drenched in sweat, in severe distress. Afzal was also running here and there, but there was no refuge. Suddenly, in the middle of the field of Mashar, a grand palace appeared, a palace carved from rubies and pearls, whose walls were radiating light. Every floor was spacious and every floor had thousands of rooms. In every room, there was a whore sitting, whose beauty would take centuries to behold. Every door was made of pure gold, and its engravings had such brilliance that the eyes of the beholder would be amazed. In front of the palace was a courtyard so vast that the entire field of Mashar could not match it. Lush green gardens, colorful fruits, fragrant trees, and between them flowed streams of milk, honey, pure wine, and clear water, whose flow was giving tranquility to the hearts. In the dense shade of the trees, there was a luxurious throne on which velvet cushions were placed. Around it stood extremely handsome and beautiful young boys, waiting for the command. In the atmosphere there were such beautiful birds whose beauty could not be described by human tongue. His heart uncontrollably asked, "Whose palace is this? Who is so fortunate that Allah has kept this for him?" Suddenly an angel asked, "What are you doing here?" Afzal replied, "I was admiring the beauty of this palace. Whose is this beautiful and magnificent palace? It must belong to some prophet or saint, right?" The angel gently replied, "No, their status is much higher than this." Afzal asked again, "Then does it belong to some great scholar?" The angel smiled and said, "No, it's not theirs either." The farmer looked at the angel anxiously and pleaded, "Then whose palace is this? For God's sake, tell me, remove my confusion." The angel looked at him with deep, loving eyes and said seriously, "This belongs to a person named Afzal, who was known in the world as an honest farmer." Hearing this, Afzal's eyes widened in shock. His lips dried up, and his heart started beating uncontrollably. He nervously said, "But who is he, and is he alive?" The angel coldly replied, "I don't know. Allah knows who he is, but unfortunately, he sold all this." Hearing this, a sensation ran through Afzal's body, and he trembled violently. His voice was shaking as he uncontrollably said, "How is this possible? Who would be so foolish to sell such a palace? Why did he sell it, and for what purpose, and for how much?" The angel said, "He was an extremely foolish person. He rejected this eternal palace for a few pieces of the world, which may or may not be in his destiny. For the sake of a few moments of luxury and comfort in this temporary world, he lost forever." Then the angel looked at Afzal with piercing eyes and said, Brother, you tell me, did that person do good or bad? The farmer was drenched in sweat. His body was trembling. He said in a trembling voice, that person was indeed extremely foolish who rejected eternal bliss and went into eternal loss for a few moments of this temporary world. The farmer woke up from the dream filled with fear and regret. With a heart full of fear and regret, he fell straight to the ground and went into prostration. Tears were flowing from his eyes and heartfelt prayers were coming out. O Allah, whatever sustenance is written in my destiny, just give me that. Do not give me the greed for any temporary wealth. I can bear the hardships of this world, but I will never accept the exchange of your palaces for this temporary world. I was ignorant and foolish. My Lord, forgive me. I will never complain again. The whole night passed in crying and pleading before Allah. He kept saying, O Allah, I do not want the reward of my deeds in this world. Just forgive me. So after Sari, he quietly headed to the fields. He worked all day in the scorching sun, his hands stained with soil, but in his heart there was only one prayer. O generous one, I don't want anything, just your mercy and forgiveness. In the evening, when he returned home exhausted at the time of iftar, there were dishes of delicious food on the table, whose fragrance had spread throughout the house. He turned to his wife in panic and said in distress, Where did you get all this food from? The wife smiled and said, I don't know, sir. Some kind person left it at our doorstep and quietly left. The farmer was scared and thought that perhaps this was the reward for his deeds being given to him in this world. In a stern tone, Afzal said, Take all this away. This is not ours. Go and give it to the poor neighbor. I don't want any of this. The wife was surprised. She knew well that Afzal always enjoyed good food, but today his attitude had completely changed. But the wife was also wise. She didn't ask any further questions. Silently, she picked up the plates of food and took them to the neighbor's house. Afzal took a deep breath and sat quietly. Perhaps his heart was finding true peace today. So, Afzal broke his fast with only a date and water. His heart was in a strange state, lost in deep thoughts, trying to understand the reality of the dream. After prayers and Taraweeh, he recited the Quran for a while. Then, exhausted, he fell asleep. But in the silence of the night, another dream awaited him, a dream that had come to comfort his heart. In the deep night, he started dreaming again, the same field of Mashar and the same magnificent palace. But this time, something was different. The trees around the palace were much denser and more lush than before. The fragrance of the fruits on them was giving relief to the heart, and their greenery was soothing to the eyes. Afzal asked the angel in surprise, Can I get this palace? The angel said, No. Then Afzal said in surprise, Why? I also have many good deeds. The angel smiled and said, This belongs to a farmer named Afzal, who had sold it earlier but was wise. He bought it back. The farmer's eyes lit up. He said happily, But these trees are more than before. Why is that? The angel said in a compassionate voice, This is because last night Afzal gave that food to a poor man's hungry children, which someone had left at his doorstep. He sacrificed his right for others, and this is their reward and recompense. Allah knows who Afzal is, but he is very fortunate and wise who understood the valuable deal and quickly adopted it. The farmer's heart was filled with immense joy, such peace that he had never felt before. He immediately got up from the bed, fell into prostration, and said with tears in his eyes, O Allah, indeed you are watching everything. You are so generous that you give a great reward for our small good deeds. Surely you are the greatest benefactor. So after this dream, Afzal changed his outlook on life. He never complained to Allah about his fate again. Rather, he would advise others to be content with what they have. If the reward of a dua is not received in this world, do not be disappointed because the real reward will be given in the hereafter, which is very great. He would often tell people, do not seek the reward of dua and worship in this world, otherwise you will keep regretting. But people would call him crazy, but he knew the real truth.